Could you talk to synchronicity as an experience, but also as a process of transformation and how it can support transformation?
Yeah, Jung's concept. Jung came up with this term, synchronicity, and developed a theory that he wanted to see included in our conceptual understanding of reality. Okay, within the rational scientific framework, you have the material world and the cause and effect. Every effect has a cause. And so when you have a symptom, for instance, you ask, what is the cause of the symptom? And you try to treat the cause so as to deal with the symptom. You don't just deal with the symptom. So you trace back to causation using the idea that, it's more or less like the billiard game, one ball hits the other, hits the other, hits the other, and you have a string of causal effect. But Jung thought that doesn't explain the mystery of what we experience in life, actually. There are certain events that are accidental. You have different lines of causation suddenly meeting in a way that brings about a change, okay? A change in attitude, significant change in your life. And probably the most significant moments and decisions in your life come out of these so-called accidental experiences. Okay. So Jung coined this term, synchronicity, meaning at the same time, there is a meeting between psyche and matter, between inner and outer, between something you need, maybe you don't even know you need it, and something that comes to you. And the two match up in such a way that they produce a whole new flow, a whole new direction in life. And so included in the definition of synchronicity is not only a causal, coincidence, but meaning. He said it's a meaningful coincidence. And that meaning, the source of that meaning is not situated in our ego consciousness, nor is it the product of interpretation. It's delivered.
Mm.
We don't make meaning. Here he separates himself from the existentialists, which they say you have to make all your meaning. He said, in synchronicity, meaning is delivered from somewhere else. Where does it come from? That's the mystery. So you can theorize about that. There is now quite a lot of discussion around this, what's called dual aspect monism. A book has been written about it, and there's a man in Zurich who's a physicist and a philosopher named Harold Ottmanspacher, who, with a colleague of his, wrote a book called Dual Aspect Monism. So the idea is that there is a monad, an unknown something, think of it as a box or an algorithm or something, in the background that spontaneously manifests itself in two dimensions. One is a psychological dimension and the other is a material dimension, or inner dimension and an outer dimension. And when this happens, the source of the meaning is in that monad. There's something there that is looking for a new creative development. Mm. That's the theory, okay? So let me give you an example. One day, a man came into, it was a woman. A woman came into my office. I lived in Chicago at the time. She told me this story. She said she was on an airplane from New York to Chicago, and she sat beside a man she didn't know, never met before. And they struck up a conversation, and he was going on to Los Angeles. So they stopped in Chicago. She got off, and he went on. And they had a very nice conversation. They had a drink together. There were some sparks, you know. And when they parted, they said, "Oh, let's stay in touch." Exchanged telephone numbers and addresses. But she didn't hear from him for a couple of months, so forgot about it more or less. And then she got a message in the mail. He sent her a check that had been, it was a payment of a dividend from some company that both he and she owned stock in, let's say General Motors. And he received his check, and tucked behind his check by accident was her check. So he kindly sent her check with a nice note. So they resumed their relationship, and 6 months later they got married. Okay. How did this happen? She would say it must be destiny.
Yeah.
When you have the experience of synchronicity leading to something significant like that, you think this is destiny. This was meant to be. Where did this come from? My experience of discovering Jungian psychology was like that. I was at a party in Washington, D.C. in 1968, and we were discussing the Vietnam War. And somebody at the party said, "Oh, about warfare, you really should just read Jung on projection, shadow projection." So I went to the bookstore the next day and asked if they had any books by Jung, and they only had one, and that was his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. So I took it home, I started reading. I'm still reading it. It changed my life. That moment set me on a course that led me to Zurich, to a whole career that I didn't know existed. I might have discovered it another way, but I looked at that moment as a moment of synchronicity where I was looking for something. I knew I wasn't quite on the right track with what I was doing and studying. I needed something else, didn't know what. Into my lap falls this wonderful book, A Creation of Genius by Anil Yaffe, who wove all the pieces together. And to this day, I refer to that book. I still read it. I've taught it many times. So these moments of meaning, I call them, where inner and outer meet together in such a significant way. And when you look back on it, you see that was meant to be. That's what Jung means by synchronicity, I think.
Yeah.
Meaning is delivered. You don't know what it is at the time. You discover it later, looking back. And the thing to do with it when you have these experiences, I advise people, is just keep taking the next step and see where it leads. This has happened. What does that lead you to? What does that lead you to?
Yeah. And
the path opens up that you would have never known existed. But you continue following. When I had that experience of reading Memories, Dreams, Reflections, I came back to school. I was at Yale Divinity School at the time. And the first person I met when I walked into the campus was a professor that I had vaguely known before. His name was Becker. He was professor of pastoral psychology. So we greeted each other, and he asked me what I'd been doing. I asked him what he'd been doing. He had just been to Zurich at the Jung Institute. I didn't know such a place existed. The first guy I met when I came back. So I went into therapy with him. We worked on my dreams. And, everything started opening up. It was just totally wizardry. I've talked to a lot of people who have those kinds of experiences. If you pay attention to the synchronicity and just take it another step and follow the next one, doors start opening and other doors start closing that you thought would open, and kind of follow the path. So the idea is that there is a destiny. We have this little monad in us, I think of it that way, that sends out signals from time to time. We call it the self. What is the source of the synchronicity, Jung would say, well, the self. It can manifest itself physically, it can manifest itself psychologically. We know about psychosomatic illness. We know about healing, psychological healing, and so on. There are these phenomena that we interpret using this concept of the self as being kind of in charge of our destiny and giving our lives meaning. You know, that isn't accidental that you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing. We're doing it because we were led to do this.
Yeah, and every step of your illustrious career is led to the Mind That Ego podcast, so that must be for something.